There are moments in life when the ache feels too familiar. You sit at the dinner table with people who share your last name, but not your soul. You hear your own voice go quiet in rooms that never learned to listen. And somewhere deep inside, a question begins to pulse through your being. Why was I born into this? Into them? Into this body? This story? This pain? This is not self-pity. It is the first breath of awakening. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." What if your pain is not a curse, but a clue? What if the family you were born into, the patterns you inherited, the silences you endured, the love that felt like absence, wasn't a mistake, but a design? Not as punishment, but as preparation. Before we enter this world, many spiritual traditions speak of a sacred blueprint, the soul contract, a map etched in energy, not ink. It doesn't predict every moment, but it sets the stage for transformation. The players? Your parents, your siblings, your losses, your longings. The plot? Growth through contrast. Light is discovered through shadow. Love, not in its idealized form, but in its most honest evolution. You were not dropped into this life by accident. You were placed precisely where your soul knew it could evolve, even if that meant being born to those who could not see you, even if that meant carrying wounds that were not yours to begin with. Think of a seed planted deep in the soil. To the outside eye, it looks buried, forgotten, but in truth, it is right where it needs to be. Darkness is not always the enemy. It is the beginning of depth. And for many old souls, the first few chapters of life feel like that, misplaced, muffled, misunderstood. But the pain holds messages. The mother who withheld affection may have unconsciously taught you to search for love within. The father who never stayed may have forced you to become your own anchor. The silence you grew up around may have attuned you to the whispers of your intuition. And the heartbreaks that seemed to shatter you may have broken open the doorway to your soul. None of this erases the hurt, but it reveals that behind your earliest wounds were your earliest initiations. The soul does not grow through perfection. It grows through pressure, paradox, and pain transmuted into wisdom. So when you ask, "Why was I born into this life?" listen not with your mind, but with your memory of truth. You were born into this story not to suffer endlessly in it, but to awaken through it. The family, the chaos, the patterns, they were all part of your remembering, part of your rising, because what breaks you, in time, also rebuilds you. And what hurts you most often holds the very blueprint of who you were always meant to become. This is where your real story begins, not when the pain ends, but when you begin to see it differently. Sometimes the signs are so quiet they almost feel like your imagination. A sudden heaviness occurs when someone enters the room. A recurring number that follows you from receipts to street signs. A song that plays at the exact moment you're doubting yourself, and the lyrics feel like a whisper from something beyond. Most people dismiss these moments as background noise, but if you're still enough, you realize something is trying to reach you. Your soul has never stopped speaking. It's just been using a language the mind cannot always decode. Long before you began asking life's deeper questions, your inner world was already keeping score. Long before you had the words to name it, you were sensing things others didn't notice. The tension behind someone's smile. The lie is hiding inside a polite answer. The way your body knew not to trust someone, even when your logic tried to convince you otherwise. These aren't coincidences. These are soul signals. Carl Jung once said, "The unconscious is not just evil by nature, it is also the source of the highest good." In other words, What we overlook, what we bury, often holds the keys to our deepest truth. But here's where it gets hard. When the signs come wrapped in pain, we learn to look away. You might have grown up in a home where love was unpredictable. Maybe a parent withdrew their affection when you didn't behave a certain way, or you were praised for your achievements but ignored in your stillness. Over time, you learn to tune out your emotions just to survive. But those very emotions, the tears you swallowed, the instincts you silenced, were the earliest messages from your soul. They were never the enemy. They were the roadmap. Take Daniel, a man in his 50s who always felt drawn to helping others but was pushed into running the family business. Every time he tried to slow down, he felt guilty. Every time he expressed emotions, he was told to tough it out. For decades, he believed that his desire to support others was a weakness, but when he finally burned out, something cracked open. A chance encounter led him to a workshop on trauma-informed coaching. He realized he had spent his whole life ignoring the very calling that had followed him since childhood. What looked like a breakdown was actually a breakthrough. He had been nudged over and over by a soul that never gave up. Your signs may not be dramatic. They may show up as a stranger who says exactly what you needed to hear. A book that falls off the shelf when you are lost. A gut feeling that tells you to leave even when you have no proof. The more you start honoring these nudges, the more they multiply. This is not about magical thinking. It is about intuitive remembrance. Your soul remembers who you are and why you came. Every time you follow what feels deeply true, even when it makes no sense, you align more closely with that sacred memory. The pain was never punishment. It was a form of communication, and once you stop fearing the signs and start reading them, you awaken something ancient within you. You begin to realize your life has always been a dialogue with the divine. You just needed to remember how to listen. You try to make different choices, but somehow end up back in the same place. A relationship that feels just like the last one, even though the faces have changed. A job that drains you, even though you swore this one would be different. An argument that plays out like a script you never meant to memorize. And beneath it all, that sinking feeling in your chest that whispers, "Why does this keep happening to me?" This is where most people begin to lose hope. They tell themselves they are cursed, unlucky, or simply not good enough to break free. But Jung offered a radical insight that reframes everything. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. What if your life isn't repeating because you're failing, but because you're being called to awaken? These patterns are not punishments, they are echoes. They carry the unhealed memories from your past. Sometimes not just from childhood, but from generations before you. Emotional abandonment, betrayal, chronic overgiving, being unseen, unheard, unchosen. These are wounds that don't just go away because time passes. They repeat until they are met with presence. Think of Maya, a woman in her 40s who had just ended her third emotionally distant relationship. Each time, she had told herself she would choose better. Each time, the cycle returned. But in therapy, she uncovered a childhood where love was earned by being useful. Her parents never explicitly said it, but love felt conditional. So, as an adult, Maya was unconsciously drawn to people who required saving. Her pattern wasn't a weakness. It was loyalty to an old emotional contract her inner child had never rewritten. When we call something a mistake, we assume we should have known better. But most of what we repeat isn't driven by logic, it's driven by memory. By the part of us still hoping that if we get it right this time, the pain from the first time will finally disappear. This is what Jung meant by the repetition compulsion. The psyche seeks wholeness, not comfort. It brings us again and again to the same emotional threshold, not to shame us, but to train us, to teach us what we didn't know we needed, to give us the strength to choose differently. And this is the turning point. The moment you stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" is the moment you reclaim your power. That painful cycle becomes a sacred rehearsal, not for punishment, but for preparation. You're not broken. You're being shaped. And the cracks that seem to keep opening are not signs of failure, they are invitations. Each time the pattern appears, it asks you, will you choose yourself now? Will you speak when you used to stay silent? Will you walk away when you used to cling? Will you trust your inner knowing, even if no one else understands? This is your initiation, and when you finally stop running from the repetition and begin listening to it, you'll hear what it has been trying to say all along. You were never meant to stay stuck. You were meant to rise. After the patterns have been revealed, after the ache of repetition begins to make sense, a quieter question emerges from the stillness. What now? Not the frantic kind of question born from panic, but a deeper one whispered by the soul itself. Beneath the noise of your daily routine and the identities you wear to survive, there is a part of you that already knows. It does not forget, even when you do. And it has been waiting patiently for you to return. This part of you is not found in books or in anyone else's opinion. It lives within the inner sanctum of your being, the deeper self that existed before the world told you who to be. Jung often spoke of the self with a capital S, the unchanging core of our consciousness that contains both our divine essence and our shadow. To reconnect with it is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the forgetting began. This remembering often begins not with logic, but with longing. A yearning to feel whole again, to live from truth instead of performance. For many, this longing arises late at night, when the roles fall away and something stirs in the silence. Or in those sacred in-between moments, walking alone at dusk, standing barefoot in the grass, hearing a song that moves you for no explainable reason. These are portals, invitations, glimpses of what still lives underneath the survival mask. Reconnecting with your deeper self does not require perfection. It requires presence. One of the simplest and most profound ways to begin this journey is through regressive meditation, not in the hypnotic sense, but in a gentle remembering. It is the practice of closing your eyes, slowing your breath, and asking the questions your soul has been waiting for. Who was I before the world got loud? What did I dream about before I learned to doubt myself? What images come when I feel most alive, most peaceful, most real? You don't need to force answers. The soul speaks in symbols. It will show you an old bedroom filled with light, a doorway you walked through long ago, a sound, a color, a presence. You may hear the voice of your inner child. You may feel the embrace of something larger, wiser, infinitely loving. These are not fantasies. They are messages from your inner world, which has never stopped trying to guide you. Consider Daniel, a man in his 50s who spent decades chasing success. After burnout forced him into stillness, he tried a simple visualization. He imagined standing before a younger version of himself. To his surprise, the boy looked disappointed. "You forgot," he said. "You used to love to build things, not for money, but to make beauty." That one image changed Daniel's life. He didn't quit his job, but he began woodworking again, just for himself. And in doing so, something sacred returned. You do not need to remember everything all at once. You only need to trust the breadcrumbs, the dreams, the feelings that won't let go, the quiet nudges that feel like home. When you begin to return to the part of you that remembers, your life shifts. not in loud, explosive ways, but in subtle, steady realignments. You stop asking for directions from those who have never walked your path. You begin to navigate by inner light. And in that sacred remembering, you realize the path was never lost, only covered. And the one you've been waiting to become is the one who has been waiting for you to remember. It often begins in childhood, with a voice that echoed just a little louder, a heart that bruised more easily, or a curiosity that questioned too deeply. Maybe you cried over things others shrugged off, or sensed moods in a room long before words confirmed them. Maybe you saw things differently and were told to tone it down, to stop being dramatic, to be more normal. Slowly you began to believe that something about you was wrong when, in truth, something about you was simply awake. We live in a world that praises the polished and rewards the predictable, so it is no surprise that the very qualities that make you extraordinary are often labeled as burdens. Sensitivity becomes weakness. Depth becomes too much. Passion becomes intensity that needs to be managed. But what if none of that is true? What if these traits you've tried to hide, shrink, or silence are actually your soul's chosen instruments? Carl Jung once said that the things we repress most fiercely are often the gateway to our purpose, not because they are flaws, but because they are powerful. Your fierce empathy was never a liability. It was designed to decode emotion, to navigate human truth, to hold the pain of others and transmute it into wisdom. Your stubbornness was never resistance. It was a compass, one that refuses to settle when your soul knows you were made for more. And that wild imagination? It is not a distraction from life. It is a portal to vision, to creation, to the world you came here to help rebuild. Consider Maya, a woman who spent decades hiding her sensitivity. She was told she cried too much, felt too deeply, and took everything to heart. So she became a master at suppression, learning to smile through the ache. It wasn't until her mother passed away and the grief cracked her wide open that she began to paint again. What started as a private expression turned into a series of paintings that captured not just her loss, but something universal. Today, her art speaks to thousands, not because it is polished, but because it is honest. Her tears became colored, her depth became beauty, and what she once saw as her curse became her calling. This is the quiet miracle of self-remembrance. The realization that your gifts have never truly been lost. They were simply buried beneath the noise of shame, fear, and societal conditioning. The moment you stop apologizing for what makes you different, you begin to walk the path that was always meant for you. Not the path handed down by others, but the one inscribed in your soul's own handwriting. When you embrace your unique frequency, life responds. The right people begin to find you, not because you performed for them, but because you resonated with them. The opportunities that once eluded you begin to appear, not because you chased them, but because you aligned with them. This is not about becoming someone new. It is about returning to what has always been sacred within you. So if you've ever felt too soft, too loud, too strange, too intense, let this be your reminder. You are not too anything. You are exactly what the world needs more of. And every quirk, scar, instinct, and spark within you was chosen with intention. The next time you doubt yourself, remember this. What you once called your flaw may actually be your greatest proof. Proof that you are not broken, but built for something deeply meaningful. Proof that your soul never made a mistake when it chose this version of you. And in owning that truth, you unlock the door to the life your soul always knew you were capable of living. Not every soul you meet is meant to stay, but every soul you meet is meant to teach. Some arrive wrapped in warmth and laughter, others in silence and sharp edges. But all of them, yes, even the ones who left scars, were part of the blueprint your soul agreed to before you ever took your first breath. The relationships that broke your heart, the friendships that faded, the parent who never knew how to love you right, they were not detours, they were initiations. It is difficult to hold pain and purpose in the same hand, especially when the people who were supposed to protect you became the very source of your wounds. But what if those very relationships were not designed to destroy you, but to awaken something ancient within you? Jung once wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And in the alchemy of soul agreements, some transformations begin with fire. Think of Sarah, who carried the silence of her father like a stone in her chest. He was present in body, but absent in heart. She spent years choosing emotionally distant partners, repeating the ache she never understood. It wasn't until a conversation with her young son, who asked why she never said, "I love you," unless he said it first, that something cracked open. She realized she had inherited not just pain, but patterns. And for the first time, she didn't run from it. She wrote a letter to her father, not to send, but to set herself free. In that act, she became the one to end the lineage of quiet love. Her son would not have to question if he was enough. This is the soul's deeper architecture. The ones who hurt you may have signed up for the hardest roles in your life, not to excuse their behavior, but to understand your evolution. Your heartbreak carved out space for empathy. Your betrayal taught you boundaries. Your abandonment led you inward, where you found a presence no one could take away. These are not just life events. They are sacred mirrors. And when you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and begin asking, "What was my soul learning here?" the meaning begins to unfold. Sometimes, the most profound connections are not the ones that bring peace, but the ones that shatter illusions. The friend who left without closure, the lover who mirrored your insecurities, the sibling who competed instead of comforted. Each of them revealed something you had yet to see in yourself. And while forgiveness may not always be possible, understanding can be. When you see your life through this lens, no one feels accidental anymore. Even the fleeting encounters, a stranger's kindness on a hard day, a mentor's tough words at the right moment, become part of the design. The soul does not waste relationships. It reuses every one of them to sculpt your becoming. And perhaps the most healing realization of all is this: if your soul chose them, it also chose the strength to grow through them. You are not a passive participant in your life. You are a conscious co-creator. And as you begin to see your past not as a mistake, but as a message, you reclaim the power to write your future with clarity, compassion, and conscious intention. So pause, reflect. Who in your life still holds a piece of your awakening? Not because they gave you joy, but because they gave you a choice to close or to open, to shrink or to rise. And the moment you choose to rise, the contract shifts. You are no longer a student. You become the teacher. Letting go sounds like a surrender, but in truth, it is a return to the quiet strength that has always lived inside you. We grow up believing that holding on is noble, that endurance is proof of love or loyalty. But there comes a sacred moment when you realize that clinging is no longer courage. It is delay. And in that moment, something shifts, not outside you, but within. We often resist letting go because we believe it means forgetting the love, the effort, the investment. But the soul does not forget. It integrates. It does not discard. It refines. Letting go is not erasure. It is realignment. It is the moment you stop watering dead roots and start listening to where your energy naturally wants to grow. You are not abandoning anything. You are answering the call to become. For many, this shift is born in quiet agony. The long years of trying to fix what was never yours to heal. The countless nights spent wondering if you were the problem. The aching need to be seen, chosen, or understood. But when you finally stop asking for permission to exist, when you stop chasing the echo of what was never whole to begin with, your real life begins. Not the one shaped by fear or validation, but the one designed by your own inner truth. Jung taught that what you resist persists, and indeed the very pain you try to avoid will return, dressed in different faces and situations, until you turn to meet it with open eyes. When you do, you discover that it was never here to break you. It was here to break you open. Think of Ava, who spent 2 decades trying to make her marriage work. She endured betrayal, emotional distance, and the loss of her own voice. She stayed because leaving felt like failure. But one morning, while folding laundry in silence, she felt a question rise from somewhere deeper than her mind. What would my life be if I chose me? She wept, not from sadness, but from recognition. She had spent years surviving. Now, she wanted to live. Letting go was not an ending. It was the first true beginning. Ava moved into a small apartment with no plans, no guarantees, only her own company, and something miraculous began to unfold. Her laughter returned. Her curiosity was awakened. Her intuition, once muffled by noise, began to speak with clarity. She was not who she used to be. She was who she was always meant to become. And so it is with all of us. The act of letting go is not about pushing something away. It is about releasing the grip on what is no longer alive within you. It is about trusting that what is meant for your healing, your joy, your expansion, will not require you to shrink in order to keep it. Your soul did not come here to be buried beneath roles or regrets. It came to remember, to feel, to awaken. And sometimes, remembering who you are begins with the choice to no longer carry what was never yours to hold. So pause now, breathe. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are not late. You are right on time, for the moment your soul has been waiting for. Letting go is not the end of your story. It is the turning of the page. And what comes next is not random. It is written by the version of you who is finally ready to live. Not in reaction to the past, but in devotion to your becoming. Now, ask yourself gently, what have I been holding that no longer holds me? And what might happen if I laid it down, not in defeat, but in trust? Your new beginning is already waiting. All you have to do is stop clinging to the old ending. If this message stirred something inside you, don't stop here. The next video will take you deeper into healing, growth, and self-discovery. It might just be the breakthrough your soul has been waiting for. Tap into it now. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join a community committed to truth, transformation, and real inner change. You're not alone on this path. I'll meet you in the following video, where we continue becoming who we were always meant to be.